Hey everybody, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. You know who it is. Hope you're doing well. And let's talk about Nicki Minaj, because she just went on a bit of a Twitter tirade, a social media meltdown. As a result of Billboard, they just updated their album charts because of a new, fresh week of album sales. And lo and behold, her new record, Queen, did not get the #1 spot. Travis's Astroworld actually held on to that #1 spot for another week. And she goes into, according to her, why in this rant over here. And I guess you guys can let me know down in the comments if you think it's legitimate or not. I'll give my own opinion, of course, as we're going through these. First, she starts off with the issue being twofold, two separate sort of contributors to this problem, and the problem being her album not being #1. One fold to the issue is Spotify, because according to her, Spotify was not promoting her album as hard as they possibly could as some kind of punishment, again, according to her, because she was playing her music a little early on her whole Queen radio show on Apple Music, and because she was playing the music early over there before it was on the other streaming platforms, according to her, just 10 minutes before it was on Spotify, and it was everywhere else, because I guess it might have been on Apple Music a little bit early. Because of playing that stuff a little early, they're not going to promote her album as hard. They're not going to place her face and her music everywhere, much in the same way that they did Drake. Which, I mean, sort of comparing your album rollout on Spotify to Drake's is a little weird, a little bit of an oddity for really any artist, because one, not every artist has the popularity that Drake has, including Nicki Minaj. Okay, let's, again, unfortunately. And then on top of that, not every popular artist's album should be promoted in the same way that Drake's album was, because I mean, that was just overkill. Drake's face and record and his songs were being placed into playlists where it didn't even fucking make sense. So, and of course, Nicki sort of mentions how that's unfair, but again, I guess I just don't see why your record should get the same exact treatment. One, because of a difference in popularity, and two, that shouldn't happen again. But she goes on here. She says, Spotify had to teach me a lesson, but rewarded the man who has had his Apple radio show the longest. So Drake has had this deep connection with Apple Music for a long time, though it is a bit of a diversion, I guess, if this is a punishment. If this is a real punishment, like she said, it's not for having a connection to Apple Music, but for playing your music early, which, again, seems like a weird reason to punish somebody, but we'll go on. My music went up on Apple, so I played it. I assumed it was on Spotify and Tidal at the same time. Spotify said that Apple tweeted fans advising Queen was up, and therefore they had to teach me a lesson, but praise be to God. And she sort of says almost like, oh, I'm just kidding. I'm just, this is a bit of a dry humor thing over here, guys. I'm not really angry about all this. But maybe for a platform like Spotify, playing your music early on another platform or advertising that it's on another platform early before all the other platforms, it might be a little aggravating, sure. But I don't see how it would make Spotify want to bury music that music fans would actively want to listen to, because that just means more money in their pockets at the end of the day. I don't see why Spotify would rather have this little tit for tat sort of made up beef with Nicki Minaj as opposed to just making more money. I think at the end of the day, they would rather make more money. And Nicki even says that her label doesn't want to defend her in this issue, doesn't want to make sure that she's getting prominently featured by Spotify, or that she's not being disrespected by or throttled by or sort of thrown into the shadows by Spotify. They don't want to back her up. They don't want to defend her because they're afraid that Spotify is going to do the same thing to Ariana Grande's record, that they're going to hide Ariana Grande's record because they stood up for Nicki Minaj. Again, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Why would Spotify bury the Nicki Minaj record, and then on top of it, bury the Ariana Grande record? If you look at Spotify and you look at the streams, the most popular streams on that site and the records that make them the most money and the songs that make them the most money, they are top 40 songs. They are top 40 albums. What benefit would Spotify have to burying two albums that are undoubtedly going to debut in the top 10? Why would Spotify want to make top 10 albums more difficult to get a hold of and stream? Because it's just going to make them less money at the end of the day. I mean, again, granted, they didn't promote Nicki's album in the same way that they did Drake's, but the way that they did Drake's was borderline abusive. They had to refund people who paid for subscriptions because they hated seeing their playlists just rife with Drake crap. We'll move on because that's just sort of part one of why Nicki's album is not number one, apparently. Part two is apparently Kylie Jenner hopped onto social media and was promoting Travis's album and helped him in the sale of like this tour pass, which apparently added to the sales of the album. And she's essentially equating Travis's connections to Kylie Jenner and the fact that he's dating Kylie Jenner to his success and his popularity and so on and so forth. Which, I mean, okay, maybe that's true to a degree. You know, that could be true to a degree. However, you know, a couple things to note here. One, Travis was super popular and successful before dating Kylie Jenner, and his albums have charted very high before dating Kylie Jenner. So it's not like you can really kind of completely couch the guy's success and his popularity and the fact that people enjoy his music to who he's dating. Okay, that would be like couching Kanye's success and the fact that he's with Kim. Number one. Number two, if you're going to get down Travis's throat for, I guess, puffing up his streaming numbers by getting together with Kylie Jenner and by having her help promote his album, I mean, what do you call putting Tekashi 6ix9ine's Fifi onto your album? Because I read reports this past week that Nicki added the song to her record, which, I mean, I don't know what the royalty split on that is or if there is one or how exactly that works, but wouldn't putting that song on your album technically add to your streams of that record and potentially bring the placement of your record higher on the Billboard? So if you ended up getting the number one, would Travis be right in complaining like, oh, well, she just knocked me out of the number one spot because of Fifi? Because, I mean, if you go on a lot of streaming platforms now, Fifi is being streamed far more times than a lot of tracks that are on Nicki Minaj's, well, I mean, really, from my understanding, all the tracks that are on Nicki Minaj's new album. So Fifi is still a more viral track than any track off of Nicki Minaj's new record. So your most played song on which you're rapping over the past month or so is, or was, not even a song that was on your album. So you added it to your album to potentially puff up the streams and make the record more popular. I guess as far as numbers go, I can't see any other motivation, again, for all of the reports that I just saw of Nicki Minaj officially adding Fifi to the Queen track list, to the Queen album. Which, again, you know, if you Google this past week's news, you'll see those reports, and we'll put one down in the description box too. So, you know, of course, there's a picture of the Kylie Jenner Instagram post where she was, you know, promoting the sale of that tour pass. And Nicki saying, you know, oh, Travis sold 50K of these with no requirement of redeeming the album, so on and so forth. So, again, she's sort of saying that this is the reason I'm not number one. This is the reason I'm not number one right now. And sure, you could decry stuff like this. You could decry stuff like this. But if you are upset about that sort of thing, then I think you also have to kind of be upset with, oh, well, let me add this other artist's hot single to my album that I featured on, so it sort of brings more streaming weight to my record and gets me higher on the charts than I may have otherwise been. Yeah, that's going to be it. You guys let me know what you think about all this. How legitimate is all this? Is it 100% legitimate? Not really all that legitimate? Is she just kind of creating a stink here because she's not as popular as she used to be or she thinks she should be. Is Spotify really wronging Nicki here? Did Travis Scott really do something greasy to prevent her from getting in the #1 spot? Or, is Travis's continued placement in that #1 spot illegitimate or something because of his connections to Kylie Jenner and that whole tour pass thing? You guys let me know down in the comments, and I will catch you guys in the next video. There is another one over here next to my head that you can check out. Hit that up or the link, subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Nicki Minaj, social media meltdown, forever.